All right, next question is on funding, which is what you guys all wanted to hear about. I put this in the perspective that, you know, we keep talking about in the current economic climate, but at the same time, there has been no effective plans for improving this, and there's no long-term goal in terms of where we want to go as an, you know, as an economy. So, as nonprofit people, how do we change our focus into fundraising for this climate, this economy, as though it doesn't change? So, the question was, how do we learn to fundraise effectively in an environment where people or organizations are not as willing to spend money? Do you have any examples of, you know, creative ideas, maybe unconventional ways to fundraise? And Natasha, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. So I'm going to preface this by saying that I just recently became the interim executive director for working in the schools, like this week. So this is a really interesting question for me. However, I've been in the nonprofit world for about 15, 18 years, and so funding has always been something that I've had to address in all my roles. And I think creativity is key. Working in the schools has an opportunity. Our mission is to run literacy programs with Chicago Public School students using volunteers from communities, but also corporate volunteers. And so we actually have people from corporate America that will go to Chicago Public Schools during their lunch hour and mentor their young person, or we have young people that come downtown to their mentor and will get mentored in the downtown, in one of the businesses downtown. So creativity is key in fundraising. We just actually participated in a event last night where we had an organization, Topspin, ran a ping pong contest or tournament, and the charity, one of the charities they selected was working in the schools. And so we have been really working hard to find those unique niches where people are focused in on the mission of the organization. So that's key, having a very clear mission and not doing mission crawls, so not getting funding from this because there's an element of what you do, but being very focused on the work that you do and how you actually really market that and how do you become part of the fabric of the institutions or the communities that you work with. And so to me, creativity is key. Clarity in what you're trying to do and delivering a very solid product. Funders are not going to just fund for whatever reason. They really, unfortunately, do want to see results, and they do want to see impact, and they do want to see that there is a difference being made in what you're doing. And so how do you actually ensure that the work that you're doing is focused and concise and can be clearly stated, and that someone actually will feel good about funding or sponsoring what you're doing? You know, we have an associates board who's a younger crowd, so we have our general board, but we also have an associates board, and they are really creative in sort of social media, and they're kind of the 28 to 35 crowd, and so they are really out there having their events. We had somebody do a boat party where, you know, he invited, 50 of his best buddies. They paid money, they went out on a boat, and the proceeds came to our organization. So those are some examples of being creative. You still have to kind of, hit the pavement with, foundations and funding and government grants and all that. You still have to do those kinds of things, but also identifying board members, volunteers, even some of your, the people who you serve have really good ideas of how to actually do fundraising. So being really creative around how can you capitalize off of those populations and audiences to serve in terms of as your funders or your, liaisons to community that you may not have access to, but they do. So those are a couple of my ideas.
We're very unconventional in terms of fundraising. One of the cheap things that we do are selling loose squares and bootleg CDs, and I got that new J-Lo if anybody. Almost. We're almost that unconventional. The thing that has been our key to success is having multiple streams of funding. What many not-for-profits do, they depend upon one or two streams of funding. And in times like these, that's a prescription for disaster. I used to know of a lot of not-for-profits in Chicago. They're gone. As government cut back, they lost those government grants, they're gone. Foundations reassess their portfolios. Those same not-for-profits who used to get consistent foundation support, they're gone. And so our key to success has been multiple streams of funding, and never a delicate mix that never is over-dependent on any one source. That way, if all of our foundation funding went away, we would have to recalibrate, but we wouldn't go away. If all of our private or corporate funding, we actually have funding from corporations, if that went away, it wouldn't kill us. If all of our government funding went away, it would. Now, if it all went away all at the same time, of course, that would hurt. And the other thing that we do, we have a membership base, not just board members, but actual members who we solicit and who give us money. I mean, one member, gave us, well, several. One gave us as much as $5,000. Another member actually gave us a car that we sold, and I think we earned about $8,000 or $9,000 off of that. So there are lots of ways to fund, to put together a funding formula for an organization. But most not-for-profits, they make this terrible mistake of saying, I'm going to go to this person and get the majority of my funding, or I'm going to go to this sector and get the majority of my funding. And they live and die with that, and unfortunately, too many of them die with that. And so what's the lesson that I would leave is have multiple streams of funding, understand that funding is really about relationships. I'm telling you what I know. It's not really about the good work that you do. That it would be great if someone would say, you're doing great work, I want to fund you. It doesn't, I haven't found it to work that way. The way it works is, you do good work, and then you've got to go out and sell your work. You've got to go out and market your work and pitch it. And then you also have to have a relationships management strategy. And so I spend a lot of my time going to parties, and I hate parties, but that's where I do a lot of business, a lot of networking, a lot of passing of the cards. And then the other thing you got to do, once you do that, you've got to follow up on those opportunities. And that's where you create opportunities. Many times for us, blasting and funding, there was really no opportunity there. And so, I'll be in a casual conversation, but I've created the art of turning the conversation to how it's going to benefit our organization. And so, I'm going to use this only here. Everybody in this room is a mark. I'm looking at, okay, all right, they can add maybe, and not everybody is going to bring the same thing, but everybody can bring something for the success of the work that we do. So that's how we look at it. I still got them J-Los.
Yeah, I would echo what everybody, Phil, Natasha said. I totally agree. I would also say the relationship piece is really important. The worst thing that could happen in this type of economy is losing your existing donors. And so you sort of have to go after your existing donors like you would a new donor. You have to reinvent that relationship, make sure that you sustain those, especially foundations. They're looking for any opportunity to drop you because of their portfolios and their economy. And so I would recommend just renewing those relationships, visiting, making sure you're following up, stalking, whatever you have to do to make sure you maintain those. Really, really important. Diversity funding, obviously, government, foundation, event, small events, things like that. Focus on the programs that you do well. I became the executive director, and about 2.5 years ago, and before that I was a program director for 3 years, and we had like 5 or 6 programs that we were running that were all kind of all over the place, and I realized it was going to be really hard to get funding for all those things. So I would cut, no one wants to cut back on programs, so I would cut back on the programs that don't bring in a ton of money and really focus your efforts on the ones that do. In this time, reassess the situation and send out proposals for those types of programs. Again, hiring smart people who can run programs and write grants at the same time. We have to be hiring people that wear many hats. Especially, it sounds like Phil's organization is a lot bigger. Ours is really small. So we have to multitask, and everyone has to be able to do everything well, unfortunately, on a very small salary. So I would focus on personally what I do best, which is maintaining big donor relationships. I'm not good at running events, benefits, things like that. But I can call up a bigger donor, meet with them, have lunch, and I do feel like that's an area where I am successful in. So I would hire people, part-time people that can run your events, do things like that to also bring in money, but say focus on what you do best and then go strong at it. And also board members. Again, our board is more like an associate board. I wish they were more like a senior board. I love them, but they're very young. They don't bring in a ton of money, and so they love the parties and the small events that bring in like $1,000 or something. And I would really focus on trying to get, some of our heavy hitters have left the board and been replaced with younger donors who don't have younger board members who don't have a lot of money. I would really try to refocus the efforts on getting people who are middle, who bring in corporate support. That's where the board really is strong in. So I think corporate support is really, really important. Corporations only give about, I think it's 10 to 20%. There's so much money in this world and they barely donate anything. So I'm trying to focus on getting more corporate support. And that is, you can focus on that through your board of directors. I think they all work at companies, corporations. They should all be able to bring in 5,000, 10,000. Yeah.
Okay, the last question that I'm going to ask, and then I'll open it up to you guys, is to share your experience of managing an emergency, whether it was taking over as executive director, which we have 2 people that have done this, in a time of crisis, or managing during an emergency of the organization. What is the example and how did you deal with it? And what worked, what didn't work? So I'm going to start with Phil this time.
I will answer the question. I just want to back up a little bit, just a little. Does anybody here get After School Matters funding?
We used to.
Okay, and so I want to make just a point on that as is related to funding. Nobody in here got After School Matters funding. Organizations like After School Matters, in my opinion, were sucking up all the funding here in the city of Chicago that people like you should have been getting. And so one of the things that we as not-for-profits have to do, and I want to thank Dan again for this opportunity, we have to join together as almost a lobbying group to say, hey, we're out here, we're doing this work, we deserve the funding. The city funding, the state funding, the foundation funding. And it's not happening. Right now, there are a couple of pet projects, basically, that are sucking up money that you should get. So, are you the new director for After School Matters? No, I'm teasing. But yeah, I am right. And so we've got to do better. And so thank you, Dan, for putting this together. I think I just created an emergency. No, an emergency for us. And we do a lot of things. We work with a lot of young people, as most of you do. And unfortunately for us, emergencies are when children get shot. And that's very unfortunate. I mean, we listen to the news every day, every night, so that we know what kind of day we're going to have the next day. And that's sad. I never thought, we're an education organization, and so theoretically we're working to educate children. However, we've had to expand our mission to try and keep children alive so that we can educate children. And we go into, so I don't know if there's more of an emergency than that, but we go into crisis mode. We say, okay, who got shot? How many kids got shot? What is the retaliation? And so we almost act like a SWAT unit or a police unit, and which is not what a good education organization should be doing. That's what happens. And as you all well know, the violence in Chicago is off the charts. And so the violence among youth in Chicago is off the charts. So we're in emergency mode every time young people in Chicago get hurt, because it might affect us. We've got the great honor and privilege of working in some way, a manner, with as many as 75 to 80 schools in the city of Chicago. And anytime a young person is hurt, shot, or even we've actually provided services for some of the shooters, and that creates a whole nother level of trauma for us. So those are our emergencies, and I appreciate people thinking that Black Star is a much bigger organization. We operate like a real small organization. Everybody has got to do anything. So Trevor, one of our mentor tutors, he might be out on the streets trying to keep peace, because that's what we are. And I think that's really one of the keys to success. Never getting so secure or so big that you say, I can only do this. Myself included, everybody does everything.
Yeah.
And this was, what was the question? Emergency again. Okay.
Yeah, so totally agree. Everybody, you have to wear many hats. And I would say, like, I took over, like I said, 2.5 years ago, when the board approached me and said we have to fire all the staff, and including the executive director, we have no more money, would you step in as the interim executive director and take over this organization? So I said, sure, that sounds great. And I ended up doing that, and what happened was we just we were in emergency mode for a really long time. Cut spending, that's the #1 thing we had to do. And I know this isn't necessarily the best way to fundraise, not really, but it's maintaining what you have. So cutting spending was my #1 priority. So unfortunately, staff, my own salary, staff, bills, cleaning, the remaining staff had to plunge toilets, and myself included, we all were vacuuming, doing all of the things that all of the services that we had before were doing. So cutting spending is #1. Selling or renting space, if you can do that, was a way to stay above water at the time. We owned the building, we bought the building back when we were flourishing economically, and then, the economy plummeted, and we had to sell the 3rd floor unit, rent out the 2nd floor unit as a residential unit, and run all of our programs in the main unit. And that brought in a little bit of income and saved us. Prioritizing bill payment to the point where you go to the bank and say, I can't afford the mortgage payment this month. Can we work out some sort of plan? Can you give us a donation? That type of thing. Soliciting personal calls from big donors. So what ended up happening was our founder is part of the jewelry industry for 22 years. We've been around for 23 years, and I got together with him and we went to all of his friends in the city of Chicago and said we need money. We ended up going to a smaller organization, a foundation, and they gave us $50,000 check, and we were able to use that money to survive and then grow off of that. We got really, really lucky. If we hadn't gotten that, we probably wouldn't be here, unfortunately. But we've maintained that relationship and are still getting funding from her, and it's been a really good situation. So I would say any resource you could possibly use. The problem with individual or the founder syndrome, which I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with, I don't know if your organization was founded by an individual or a group of people, but if it's founded by an individual, then he's got a lot of friends, and once they start getting older and moving away, their portfolios start crashing. Some of them are literally dying, and they're no longer giving. So we used to get about 200,000 individual contributions, and this year we got 50. So that money we have to make it out from somewhere else, so foundation, government, all of that stuff. So I think the easiest way obviously is to cut spending, but you have to diversify your portfolio. So we looked in the CDBG, the Community Development Block Grant, that they're really great. So we get that. We used to get After School Matters funding, we don't anymore. Foundations, Community Schools Initiative with CSI, we're a partner with them, and just really trying to diversify and making that happen. And I would also say that program staff needs to be involved with all of the meetings that you go to. The program staff, they're the heart and soul of the organization, especially if they're really good, they know exactly what they're doing, they can give the founders all the facts that they need, and they can show the dedication that goes into the work that they do. So I would bring really dedicated program staff to all of the meetings that you have with major donors, if it's all possible.
Great. I think that both what Jen and Phil said is absolutely on target in terms of dealing with crisis and in terms of just keeping the doors open. My current crisis is that I just literally became interim director 2 days ago, and we don't have a development director. I'm now the interim executive director, and I still also have my position that I still have to manage. And so my crisis is just is basically having to do 3 things in an organization where there's only 10 staff, and now I'm 3 of those 10 staff. So I guess, definitely needing to really rely on a lot of the staff and figuring out how to work with volunteers. I've already, recruited some interns to come in and do some support work, because there's just no possible way for like 1 person or 2 people to get the work that needs to happen, which is, cultivating those relationships, maintaining those relationships, keeping the work going. We don't want to touch the program staff, because the program staff, just like Jen said, is the heart and soul of what you're doing. And so how do you keep them focused and motivated and don't burn them out, but yet needing to also make sure all the other things are going on. So one of the plans and one of the questions was around, how do you, manage to get things done? Well, I wasn't joking when it's just like I've got a 30-day calendar, I've got a 60-day, I've got a 7-day. It's like really figuring out what needs to get done when and how I can get other people to support the work that needs to happen. And so right now, luckily, our executive director that is leaving, finished writing all our grants through till January, thank goodness. So like all of our existing relationships, and funding is sort of in place. And so it's now just looking at the new things that need to go on and really keeping the program moving. And so I guess just really effective, good planning, and that's all I can think of right now in terms of how to deal with crisis, because I'm dealing with crisis right now, so I don't know what else to say. So